Hey vinyl community, Jeff here. Been putting this video up for a couple days. Basically just kind of been feeling under the weather. Got a little stuffiness going on today, so excuse me, but feeling well enough to jump on board with the next in my video series on 10 great albums from certain years. I've done 77 through 80. I'm up to 81 now. Again, if you haven't seen the previous ones, these are basically 10 great albums ranked loosely from my collection that I own on vinyl at this time. I did not dig into my CDs, and if I don't, there's some great albums that came out in some of these years that maybe I just don't own at this point. So this is not a utter definitive 1981 list of greatest albums. This is the greatest albums that I own from 1981. There's a couple that came out that year that I'm like, I don't have that on vinyl and I need to get that. So some albums that definitely would have made the rankings. So, but here's what we got. Jumping on, starting off with number 10 is the first album by Raven. Now, this made number 10. I didn't have this album back in the day. I didn't get on board with them until the second album. And even then, they were kind of quirky, so they were not much of a favorite. A lot of these rankings tend to be based on how much I listened to them over the years, not just in 81. A lot of these albums I didn't even own in 81. Well, not a lot of them, a couple of them. But this one I didn't own in 81. So, but still, the amount of playtime they got since then is what really pops up in memory as what makes them rank where they are. But anyway, so yes, this is the first Raven full-length album, and it is a classic. Great stuff. Loved this album, so we brought that in number 10. AC/DC, For Those About the Rock. Now, like I mentioned in my 1980 video, I discovered them on Back in Black pretty much. I wasn't into them in the Bon Scott years up until discovering them. And when this album came out, those Back in Black and For Those About the Rock were just like two sides of the same coin. They got played to death. The videos came out for these songs. We loved them. They were on MTV. MTV was a big factor in the stuff we were loving at this time frame. And this album still, pivotal album for them, in my opinion. And it's just got some great classics. This whole early era of the Johnson years made it just ingrained in my mind. Great stuff. At number 9. Surprisingly, at number 8, Iron Maiden Killers. Not that it's surprising on the list, but surprised it's this low. But again, basing it on the amount of playtime. I love the Paul Di'Anno years, but I still think I favor the Bruce Dickinson years a little bit more. This album, though, back in the day, loved it. Loved the artwork. I used to have it up on my wall just because I thought it was such a cool art piece. Yeah, it's kind of graphically weird, but just love the way it was drawn. And this album has so many great Iron Maiden classics for this time frame. Love this album. Anyway, brought that one in at number 8. Number 7 is a twofer. I mentioned this album in the previous one because of their first album made the 1980 cut. This is the 1981 cut. Probably at the time my all-time favorite Michael Schenker Band album. This, I think, is where I discovered them at. These songs are ingrained into the history of my brainwaves for this band, for this lineup. Cozy Powell, you had everything. Gary Barden. This is absolutely, in my mind, just one of the perfect albums of the early days, and I love this album. And close to it is the one that came out later that year in 81, One Night at Budokan. In my opinion, one of the most ultimate live albums for that time frame specifically, but in general, just absolutely love this live album. So these ranked in at number 7. In at number 6, Denim and Leather. By far my favorite Saxon album, I think, in general. This is about the time I fully discovered them, and then went back and picked up the other stuff. This album got the most airplay over the years. Absolutely up there. Now, sure, a lot of their later stuff is great too, and I'd have a hard-pressed time ranking a lot of that. But for the early years, this album is where I discovered them. This album has gotten so much airplay on my mind over the years that I love that. At number 5, Riot's Fire Down Under. I believe around this or Restless Breed is where I discovered them. I might have discovered them at the same time. I remember the albums in the day because they have real similar covers as far as just having the critter on the front here. But honestly, I think back in the day when these came out, I wasn't really keen or didn't notice really the major difference in the fact that there were two different vocalists. These two albums, this and Restless Breed that followed, were just solid. They got played to death. And I don't know which one came first as far as if I discovered them in here or they're just both so ingrained in my mind. But this album, absolutely solid, hard rocking, amazing band that, didn't get as much publicity as they probably really deserved. This album was later reissued on CD in the 90s with a bunch of bonus tracks. Would have been great to see those released on vinyl, but the bonus tracks were just solid rock stuff too. There's like 5 or 6 bonus tracks. Great stuff from that time frame. Of course, the singer has passed away since then and everything, as did the singer on the next album. So, but yeah, Riot, always near and dear to my heart. Love their stuff. Number 4, Ozzy's Diary of a Madman. I'm pretty sure, as I mentioned in the last video, this is, I think, the album that I actually discovered Ozzy on, and then got the Blizzard of Oz before this. But this album, in my group of friends, was the one just we played to death all the time. And of course, you got Over the Mountain, and I mean, this has got so many great songs on here. Flying High Again. This was the early time when people were, just seeing what Ozzy had beyond Black Sabbath. And it just seemed like every song was amazing. And, we didn't know all the inner turmoil with all the band members. We thought this was just great stuff with, Tommy Aldridge and Rudy Sarzo and all that. Regardless of who played on the albums, it was just, that was what we thought, and saw the live shows and great stuff. So, yes, there you go. Number 4. Number 3. This was a tough one. Van Halen, Fair Warning. I mean, because in this year, there were some other bands that really could have been in the list. But again, there's 1 or 2 that it was hard to leave them off. I probably could have bumped anyway. But this album is around the time when we saw Van Halen in this tour. Maybe that's why it's so ingrained in my mind. This album, to me, was just start to finish amazing. Even though it's got a handful of hit songs. MTV was out. They did a couple of the live tunes. So This Is Love, things like that. We started seeing them, live. We didn't really see much of their stuff from previous albums, the weirdo videos that were made back in the day. This was when we really started seeing them visibly on the East Coast. And this album, to me, just stands out as just being just right up there. Just almost perfection. Great stuff. Kind of the end of the hard rock era of Van Halen, because Diver Down started doing I love Diver Down, but you started getting into a little more commercially appeal, cover tunes, clarinets, things like that. It started being a little more diverse. This is just straight up, like the previous albums, straightforward hard rock. Great stuff. Number 1 and 2, and all of those are really tough to decide. But I threw in number 2, Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. This was back in the day when we had no clue on the East Coast about any of these bands, and I bought them solely for looks. Saw this in the indie rack. Looked metal. Had to buy it. You saw that. You saw what they looked like on the back. You're like, yeah. And that was about it. Actually, it was probably around this time that we did see Livewire, the video. I don't think I might have saw that after the album, but yeah, for sure, this album just, and it's it's not even the hardest rocking Crue album compared to like the next, but in all of its kind of punky quirkiness, it's just amazing, and it's just absolutely still ranked up there as one of my favorites. All right, and the number 1 album for 1981 is Mob Rules by Black Sabbath. So again, this is about the time, the 80-81 era is when I really discovered Black Sabbath. I had not really spent any time listening to the Ozzy years of Black Sabbath, and probably up to this point, probably didn't know a whole lot about the Dio years of Rainbow and all that. So this is when I was breaking into other bands, getting out of my, Kiss rut, and early it was like Kiss, and then it became just Kiss and Van Halen, and then other bands started breaking in around 80, 81. And so that's when the Sabbath years came in. We had this and Heaven and Hell. We had the Dio years, and it was only later that we went back and listened to the earlier Ozzy years of Black Sabbath. But to me, these two albums rank up as just two of the best, and it's obviously the Dio influence. It's just great stuff. But in general, love all the songs. We listen to these two albums all the time. I think Mob Rules inches out Heaven and Hell a little song-wise, but honestly, both albums, I can almost put them side by side, and they're just both great releases. So that's it. That's my top 10 greatest albums that I own in my collection. I'll be back with another one now. Hopefully it won't be as croaky sounding, but thanks for watching. Rock on and rock hard.